Throughout history, criminals have often set their sights not just on stealing for survival, but on executing elaborate, jaw-dropping heists that shock the world. These robberies were not your typical snatch-and-grab jobs. They were intricately planned, daringly executed, and often involved millions, if not billions, of dollars in cash, jewels, or precious artifacts. What makes these cases fascinating isn't just the sheer value of what was taken, but the audacity, creativity, and sometimes even the bizarre twists that came with each operation. Some of them happened in broad daylight. Others required tunneling, impersonation, or hacking security systems that were supposedly impenetrable. Each of the 10 cases we'll explore in this video offers a unique glimpse into the minds of master criminals. These heists have made headlines, inspired movies, and challenged the world's most advanced security systems. From bank vaults in Brazil to diamond districts in Belgium, from airport depots to art museums, these robberies span continents and decades. And while some of the culprits were caught, many others simply vanished, leaving behind only rumors, theories, and millions of missing dollars. Some heists were pulled off with military precision, while others were shockingly low-tech, proving that sometimes boldness outweighs sophistication. So grab your seat, because you're about to take a journey into the world's most infamous crimes of opportunity, planning, and sheer nerve. We'll uncover how they did it, what went wrong, or right, and where the stories stand today. This isn't just a countdown. It's a deep dive into the minds of the world's most notorious thieves and the perfect storms that let them pull off the impossible. The Central Bank of Iraq heist -$1 billion, 2003, in the early hours of March 18, 2003, just before the US invasion of Iraq, one of the boldest bank robberies in modern history took place. Saddam Hussein, still in power at the time, allegedly orchestrated the theft of nearly $1 billion from the Central Bank of Iraq in Baghdad. Using a handwritten note, reportedly signed by Saddam himself, operatives arrived at the bank and ordered that the funds be released. The bank complied, and trucks loaded with bricks of cash drove off into the chaos that was quickly descending on the country. This operation was shockingly simple in execution. There were no masks, no weapons, no underground tunnels. Just a note and absolute authority. Much of the money was later recovered by US forces during raids, hidden in walls, and stashed in palaces. But a significant portion was never found, disappearing into the fog of war. The robbery remains one of the largest single bank thefts in human history, and it shows how power can sometimes substitute for cunning. The psychological effect of this heist rippled globally. It wasn't just about the amount stolen. It was a demonstration of how political instability and unchecked authority can enable massive financial crimes. Unlike most other robberies, the central bank heist didn't need elaborate planning, just control and timing. That's what made it so terrifyingly effective. And while Saddam Hussein was eventually captured and executed for unrelated charges, this crime remains a symbol of his reign, a chilling example of how absolute power can open any vault. The Antwerp Diamond Heist -$100 million, 2003. The Antwerp Diamond Center in Belgium is one of the most secure places on Earth for high-value gems. But in February 2003, a group of Italian thieves led by Leonardo Notarbartolo pulled off what would later be called the heist of the century. They bypassed 10 layers of security, including infrared heat detectors, seismic sensors, Doppler radar, and a lock with 100 million possible combinations. Over the course of a weekend, they cleared out more than 100 safety deposit boxes without triggering a single alarm. Notarbartolo posed as a businessman for years, gaining access and trust within the Diamond Center. On the weekend of the heist, the crew used custom-built tools, insider knowledge, and old-school tricks like hairspray to disable sensors. They snuck in through an office building, deactivated the vault, and then disappeared before anyone realized something was wrong. It wasn't until Monday morning that the robbery was discovered, and by then, the diamonds, gold, and other valuables were long gone. The authorities eventually arrested Notarbartolo after finding incriminating evidence in a partially burned bag of garbage. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but most of the loot was never recovered. Investigators believe that the diamonds were immediately dispersed through underground markets, making them nearly impossible to trace. To this day, much of what was taken remains missing. This heist wasn't just about money. It was about planning, patience, and precision. The Antwerp diamond heist is studied by security experts and criminologists alike, not because of how it failed, but because of how flawlessly it was executed, and how close it came to being the perfect crime. The British Bank of the Middle East heist -$20 -50 million, 1976. In January 1976, Beirut was in the throes of civil war, and the chaos created the perfect opportunity for one of the boldest robberies of the 20th century. A Palestinian militant group, with assistance from professional locksmiths, broke into the British Bank of the Middle East. They used explosives to blast a way in from a nearby church and spent 2 full days inside the bank, undisturbed. Over 160 safety deposit boxes were emptied, with stolen assets, including gold bars, jewels, stocks, and currency, valued at up to $50 million. The heist was militarily precise, yet low-tech. The robbers used skilled craftsmen to open deposit boxes without damaging their contents. Because Beirut's infrastructure and law enforcement were virtually collapsed due to the war, there was no alarm, no resistance, and no investigation strong enough to track the culprits. The loot was moved through underground smuggling networks and effectively vanished from the legal financial system. This robbery is often overshadowed by flashier, high-tech thefts, but it remains one of the most efficient and opportunistic bank heists ever executed. It proved that during times of conflict, banks, even international ones, are vulnerable. The political implications of this robbery also drew attention, as it blurred the lines between political insurgency and organized crime. To this day, none of the stolen goods have ever been recovered, and no arrests have been made. The British Bank of the Middle East heist stands as a ghost story in the world of criminal history, massive in scale, but hidden by the fog of war and silence. The Knightsbridge security deposit robbery -$97 million, 1987. In July 1987, a man walked into a bank in London and asked to rent a safety deposit box at the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center. What the employees didn't know was that this man was Valerio Vicky, an Italian career criminal wanted for over 50 armed robberies. Once inside the vault, Vicky and an accomplice pulled out guns, subdued the staff, and hung a closed sign on the door. For hours, they went through hundreds of boxes, eventually stealing almost $100 million in cash, jewelry, and valuables. What made this robbery particularly shocking was the ease with which it was carried out. The security team had failed to monitor critical areas, and Vicky had identified and exploited every weak point. Once the vault was looted, the criminals simply walked out. Days later, police uncovered fingerprints leading back to Vicky, who had already fled to Latin America. But in a bizarre twist, he returned to the UK to retrieve his Ferrari and was arrested. Vicky's arrogance may have led to his capture, but the damage was already done. Only a small portion of the stolen goods was ever recovered, and the robbery sent shockwaves through Britain's financial institutions, prompting sweeping changes in security protocols across the country. Vicky later died in a shootout during a day release from prison in 2000. The Knightsbridge heist became a cultural reference point for 1980s crime in Europe. Slick, high-profile, and ultimately deadly, it remains a sobering reminder of how even the most prestigious institutions can be vulnerable to bold, calculated moves. The Banco Central burglary -$70 million, 2005. In August 2005, one of the most jaw-dropping bank heists in history occurred in Fortaleza, Brazil. Over several months, a gang of criminals rented a building near the Banco Central and dug a tunnel, over 78 meters long, directly into the bank's vault. Disguised as a landscaping company, they transported tons of earth without raising suspicion. Then, over a weekend when the bank was closed, they entered the vault and made off with 5 containers filled with used, unmarked Brazilian real notes, equivalent to about $70 million. The tunnel itself was a feat of engineering. It had lighting, ventilation, and reinforced walls. When authorities discovered the break-in on Monday morning, the robbers were long gone, having vanished into the city. Despite a massive manhunt and numerous arrests over the following years, a large portion of the money was never recovered. The planning, patience, and precision required to complete this operation stunned investigators around the world. What makes this heist especially remarkable is the criminal professionalism behind it. The group used engineers, geologists, and logistics experts. This wasn't just a group of thieves, it was an operation that mirrored a legitimate business in scope and sophistication. The use of a fake company to mask their activities remains one of the most clever aspects of the plan. The Banco Central burglary is still considered one of the largest and most daring heists ever carried out in Latin America. It not only showed the weaknesses in urban banking infrastructure but also became a blueprint for future tunnel-based crimes around the globe. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist -$500 million, 1990. On the night of March 18, 1990, two men dressed as Boston police officers entered the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. They claimed to be responding to a disturbance, but once inside, they tied up the guards and spent 81 minutes stealing 13 pieces of art, including works by Vermeer, Rembrandt, and Degas. The combined value? Over $500 million, making it the largest art theft in history. To this day, not a single piece has been recovered. The heist was strange from the start. The robbers ignored some of the museum's most valuable items, suggesting they either had a specific list or were unfamiliar with art value. They even took a Napoleonic eagle finial, an odd, low-value item, while leaving behind more famous works. The museum's security system was outdated, and the guards were unarmed and inadequately trained, allowing the thieves free rein for over an hour. Over the decades, multiple leads have surfaced, including possible mob connections and international trafficking routes. In 2013, the FBI announced that they had identified the culprits, but the details remain sealed, and no charges have been filed. The museum continues to offer a $10 million reward for information leading to the recovery of the stolen pieces. Today, the empty frames still hang in the museum, a haunting reminder of the heist. The Gardner robbery isn't just about loss, it's about mystery, unresolved endings, and the fragility of cultural heritage in the face of criminal ambition. The Securitas Depot robbery -$92 million, 2006, one of the most violent and meticulously executed heists in British history occurred on February 21, 2006, at the Securitas Cash Depot in Tunbridge, Kent. The gang behind it abducted the depot manager and his family at gunpoint, forcing him to cooperate. Simultaneously, the robbers infiltrated the building, restrained 14 employees, and made off with over £53 million in cash, equivalent to around $92 million. The operation took only a few hours but had been planned for months. What set this heist apart was its mix of psychological terror and tactical organization. The criminals wore elaborate disguises, including police uniforms, and used inside information to gain access to the building. The abduction of the manager's wife and young child was used as leverage, making the staff comply without resistance. Once inside, the gang moved quickly and efficiently, loading pallets of cash into a truck and vanishing into the night. Despite the scale of the robbery, several members were eventually captured, and parts of the stolen money were recovered. However, millions remain missing, and some suspects are still at large. Surveillance footage and forensic evidence played a major role in tracking down the culprits, showing the growing importance of technology in solving modern crimes. The Securitas Depot heist exposed major flaws in security protocols and triggered significant policy reforms across UK cash handling facilities. It remains a stark example of how ruthlessness and meticulous planning can pierce even the most fortified systems, with devastating results. The Brinks Mat robbery -$39 million, 1983. Early on the morning of November 26, 1983, 6 armed men broke into the Brinks Mat warehouse near Heathrow Airport in London. They were expecting to find around £3 million in cash but instead stumbled upon a far greater treasure: 3 tons of gold bullion, diamonds, and cash valued at nearly £26 million, about $39 million at the time. What began as a simple robbery turned into one of the UK's most infamous gold heists. The gang had inside help from a security guard who left a door unlocked. Once inside, they doused employees in gasoline and threatened to light them on fire unless they cooperated. After discovering the unexpected stash of gold, the thieves quickly loaded it into a van and disappeared. Laundering the gold became a massive operation that spanned years and continents, involving corrupt bankers, dealers, and middlemen. In the years that followed, many involved in the robbery were murdered, disappeared, or arrested, leading to speculation of a criminal curse. The gold was melted down, recast, and sold, with some of it allegedly entering the legitimate market. While some suspects served time, most of the gold was never recovered. The Brinks Mat case remains a reference point in criminal history, both for the amount stolen and the consequences that followed. It also serves as a warning: in the world of high-stakes crime, Even unexpected success can lead to betrayal, bloodshed, and ruin. The Lufthansa heist -$6 million, 1978. Immortalized by the film Goodfellas, the Lufthansa heist was a mafia-linked robbery at JFK Airport on December 11, 1978. Led by James, Jimmy the Gent, Burke, a Lucchese crime family associate, the gang stole over $6 million in cash and jewelry from a vault. The money, flown in from Germany, was meant for American banks. The operation took less than an hour and went off without a single gunshot fired inside the terminal. The heist had been planned using inside information from airport workers. The robbers wore ski masks and carried silenced weapons, quickly overpowering security and loading the loot into a van. Although the robbery was flawlessly executed, its aftermath was chaotic and deadly. Burke, paranoid that someone would talk, allegedly ordered the murders of several crew members. The bodies began piling up, and the FBI quickly became involved. While some of the gang was arrested on unrelated charges, the majority of the stolen money was never recovered. Jimmy Burke was never officially charged with the heist, though he was later imprisoned for other crimes and died in 1996. The case became a cultural icon, not just for the crime itself, but for the sheer spectacle and mafia mythology that surrounded it. To this day, the Lufthansa heist symbolizes the dark glamour of organized crime and the brutal consequences of betrayal in the criminal underworld. The Great Train Robbery -$3.80 million, 1963. On August 8, 1963, a group of 15 men stopped a Royal Mail train traveling from Glasgow to London in what would become known as the Great Train Robbery. Using a false signal light and inside information, they hijacked the train and moved it to a remote bridge. There, they spent over 30 minutes offloading £2.6 million, worth about $3.8 million then, or over $60 million today adjusted for inflation. The robbery was highly organized. The gang included former soldiers, engineers, and criminals who planned for months. They escaped to a remote farmhouse where they hid for weeks. However, sloppy handling of evidence led to the discovery of their hideout. Police found fingerprints and documents, which led to the arrest and conviction of most of the gang. Yet, some, like Ronnie Biggs, became folk heroes after escaping prison and evading capture for decades. The robbery captivated the British public, not just for its scale but for its almost cinematic execution. No firearms were used during the heist, but the train driver was injured, which later cast a darker light on the crew. Many of the robbers received harsh sentences, but their story remains one of the most famous heists in history. The Great Train Robbery showed how organization, patience, and insider knowledge could outmatch even the British rail system. It has since inspired books, films, and conspiracy theories, ensuring its place in the Hall of Legendary Crimes. These 10 robberies are more than just stories of crime. They're complex tales of human ambition, desperation, and ingenuity. Some were executed with military precision, while others took advantage of chaos or complacency. But they all share a common theme: audacity. Whether it was tunneling under a bank, infiltrating a diamond center, or hijacking a train, these criminals dared to attempt the impossible, and sometimes they got away with it. Each heist left a mark, not just on the institutions robbed, but on society itself. They forced banks, museums, and governments to rethink security, exposed flaws in the systems we trust, and captivated the public imagination. In many cases, the stolen goods were never found. In others, the culprits vanished without a trace. The mystery is part of the allure, and part of the legacy. While these stories may sound cinematic, they are chillingly real. Behind each headline is a trail of victims, massive investigations, and long-lasting consequences. These robberies remind us that even in a world of cameras, vaults, and alarms, no system is completely secure. The question isn't just how they did it, it's whether someone, somewhere, is planning the next one.